again, the background, I was hired just after 9/11. We hired about 500 or 600 new investigators across the country. And I started in August of 2002 doing inspections. Initially, when I was training, I was doing food and biologics and devices and all sorts of stuff, but then I really honed in on pharmaceutical drug inspections, where I continued to do that, I guess, for about 12 years before I switched over to headquarters. So the talk is going to be focused solely on drug work, because that's what I've been doing. But hopefully, if you have any other questions outside of that area, I can either answer those or try to find some information for you if I don't know the answer right away. So without further ado, I'm going to give a little talk on inspection trends, again, drug-related. So that's at the actual site of the inspection, and then take that on to regulatory action trends, what comes out of the inspection. Give a little update on some guidances that have been issued recently, and then hopefully close up with time for questions and answers. So starting first with inspection observation trends. So this is over the last 2 calendar years. The blue is for calendar year 2015, and the red is for 2016. These are inspectional deficiency citations that investigators would issue at the close of the inspection. On the left, you can see the time cited, and on the bottom is the citation that we actually issued. These are all 211 citations, so again, drug inspections. The next couple slides, I'm going to go into more detail in terms of what each of these particular citations are. But you can see here the numbers of times that they were cited. These citations only represent finished dosage forms or sterile active pharmaceutical ingredient citations. And it only includes those observations that were issued in our software systems, either Turbo or eInspect. Turbo is our old software program that we use to issue 483s, and we've been switching over to eInspect. I do believe that we are officially now 100% using eInspect. So the numbers might be a little bit funky as we were doing that transition from one program to the next. Also, it's important to note that these citations only include the 43s that were issued where investigators didn't have any problems with the software program. It does happen that there are issues with their computers, whether you're international or domestic. You know, as we all know, there's computer issues that do occur. So if the investigator had to write the 43 outside of Turbo, outside of eInspect by hand or just in a Word document, then those numbers wouldn't be included here either. So to get a little bit more into the trends, 8 of the top 10 citations for finished dosage or sterile APIs from these calendar years are repeats. 21122D, which is the responsibilities and procedures applicable to a quality control unit, are not in writing or fully followed. And then also 211160B, lab controls. It's really a general, both of these two are very general. 22D can encompass issues with complaint handling, investigations, issues in the laboratory, issues with production, really anywhere that there's issues with the quality control unit. And 160B is also a catch-all for issues in the laboratory. 211192 always is seen in the top 10 citations from year to year, and that's inadequate investigation. The investigations could pertain to those products that have been distributed or maybe even not distributed. Some that are new to the list for calendar year 2016 is 211167A. Equipment and utensils are not cleaned, maintained, or sanitized at appropriate intervals to prevent malfunctions or contaminations. And 211-166A is the lack of a stability program. So when thinking about these inspection trends, you have to think about two things. What do they mean to me working for FDA, and what do they mean for you as industry? So to us in the FDA, me personally, I pull these inspection trends when I do a talk on inspection trends. It's interesting to me personally to know what's going on, and as well as being a compliance officer to see, all the different cases that we have, and what relays from inspectional observation into a regulatory action citation, perhaps on a warning letter. We also have our Office of Surveillance. They may be using these inspection trends as they're looking to set up future inspections, or also looking at possible training sessions in the future. But it's important to know that these trends are not the end-all be-all. It's just could be what's hot right now. I remember being an investigator. We would be learning about something new, and we would kind of talk in our network of investigators and share what we've been learning, and that type of observation might be coming up more frequently than not. It's definitely cyclical in terms of that. What do they mean to you? It's an interesting question, because while the inspection trends are interesting and they're great to learn about, and it's nice to hear what's going on in industry so that you stay up on top of training topics, it's also important for you to be spending a lot of time and a lot of energy focusing on your site and understanding the intricacies and the necessary trainings that you need to improve and maintain quality of the products that you're in sites. Also, to point out, the 43 includes observations that are made in the investigator's judgment where there's issues that they're seeing at your site. The 43 lists observations made by investigators during their inspection of your facility. They're just inspectional observations. Again, they are issues that the investigator deems in their judgment that could have an impact on the quality of the product, and they do not represent a final agency determination regarding the compliance of the site that's being inspected. So after the 43s are issued and we're looking at those types of trends, the next type of trend that may be of interest to you is the regulatory action trend. What comes out of the 43 onto warning letters. So in 2016, you can see here the warning letters that were issued and cleared. We issued 54 warning letters. There are other warning letters that are in various stages of drafting that will issue or have already issued in 2017. On top of the warning letters, we also have regulatory meetings, or 27 regulatory meetings that we held last year, whether by teleconference or in person on site at our headquarters or in the district offices. Import alerts, 47 import alerts. That includes 2 import alerts, 6640 and 9932. The 6640 is for GMP deficiencies, and the 9932 is for when the firm is refusing inspection. And then also we have issued 4 untitled letters. Going back to the warning letters quickly, I wanted to point out that this does exclude the compounding-related actions. So the pharmacy compounding inspections you may have heard of have become drawn to the center of everybody's attention after the cases up in Massachusetts with the New England Compounding Center. Okay, so looking more specifically at the recent warning letter trends, in the last year we've seen a lot of just rudimentary CGMP deficiencies. I have a couple slides that I'll go into for that, but just a general example would be that the firm was found to not be testing product prior to release. When we're looking at these rudimentary CGMP deficiencies, we're finding a lot of these observations in places that are manufacturing non-application drug products, over-the-counter drug products, and monograph drug products. So a monograph drug product would be a product that the firm does not have to submit an application for. There's information in our in the Code of Federal Regulations that specifies exactly what the product is to contain in terms of percentages of active pharmaceutical ingredients and how the product is to be labeled for use. So again, we're seeing these rudimentary GMP deficiencies more often in those types of places. Data integrity issues, I'll get more into that. Supply chain information and pedigree. Sterility assurance, we're seeing trends there in both the pharmacy compounding inspections as well as the traditional pharma inspections. And then, as I mentioned before, for the import alerts, we're also getting refusal of FDA inspections. That could be a blanket refusal where the investigators are not allowed into the building, or it could be refusal of providing information or access to certain areas during the inspection, or delaying the inspection in any manner. So first, with the rudimentary CGMP, I pulled a couple of comments straight from the warning letters that have been issued. All of our warning letters are posted on our website, fda.gov, so you can go and look at the warning letters yourselves in your free time. But these are just a couple that I pulled as examples. So first, you stated to our investigator that your firm does not have a quality unit to review and approve the release of your drugs. Second, you stated to our investigator that you did not test your finished product for assay and that you did not have established final specifications for release testing of your drug products. And third, during the inspection, the investigator recorded 30 warehousing spaces and observed a rodent in the room adjacent to the warehouse at your facility. So again, these are just very general issues that we're finding. Not having a quality unit, that's a very basic CGMP requirement, testing and just cleanliness of the facility. And then another, I believe this warning letter was issued to a repackager of drug products. This is just a basic lack of written procedures. They had no written procedures for relabeling, sampling, product release, document retention, training. This letter was issued in 2016, so it was prior to September 2014. The firm had no records for any of the relabeling operations. And then the last example here would be the firm was found to manufacture various types of products using the same equipment, and there was no evidence that the equipment was cleaned appropriately between the products so that there would be no cross-contamination of one product to the next. In this particular case, the firm was manufacturing potentially toxic chemicals on the same line as they were manufacturing the drug products. Okay, the next topic I wanted to quickly go into is data integrity. So what does data integrity mean? Data integrity refers to the requirement for complete, consistent, and accurate data. Data should be attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original or true, and accurate. The concept of data integrity truly does underpin the CGMPs, And it's important to understand that it applies not only to commercial manufacturing, but also ahead of that to the exhibit batches, information to support drug products and drug applications, and also clinical practices. So data integrity in the last couple of years has really been a hot topic. It's trended over the last few years in our warning letters, and it's been discussed a lot in the trade magazines that have been available for the pharmaceutical industry to review. But it's important to understand that this is not a new requirement. In the terms of the finished drug products, we look to the Code of Federal Regulations 211. And you'll see here there's a variety of regulations that speak to data integrity. I'm not going to read each of these off. I am going to be providing a PDF of the slides later so that you can go back to look at any of these as you wish. But just important to understand that this really isn't a new requirement. Also, I mentioned the 211s are for finished dosage form products, but thinking about active pharmaceutical ingredients, also data integrity is not a new concept. For APIs, we look at ICH Q7 for our guidance. There are no regulations for APIs. It all goes back to the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. So Q7 helps us to interpret the requirements. So in terms of data integrity, one of the sections in ICH Q7 that discusses is the computerized systems at section 5.4. Okay, so, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so why is data integrity important to us? Why is it something that the agency is concerned about? We really do rely on accurate information to ensure the drug quality. We receive drug product applications where we do pre-approval inspections for those on site, but those pre-approval inspections may only be a week or a week and a half, and then the rest of the application review is done at headquarters, where our reviewers look at everything from the test method validation, production, standard operating procedures, clinical trial information, all the data that is there to support the application. So if the data that is in these applications and the data that's on site that we're looking at during the inspections, if that data is not accurate, it really does break the trust between the agency and the firm. As I mentioned, the inspections may only be a week or a week and a half, maybe every year or every other year. So we need to rely on what the firms submit to us in the applications and what we're looking at during the inspections. We need to be able to rely on that information to understand the general culture of the firm that we're inspecting and we're looking at, to make sure that the products are going to meet quality specifications when we're not on site and when we're not there. So some of the important concepts to understand when we're thinking about data integrity is to really understand what the data entails. So just to do a couple definitions here, metadata. Metadata describes the attributes of other data and provides context and meaning. It's paramount for firms to understand what the metadata is and how important it is to the data that they are generating. Metadata might include things like audit trails or processing information or methods if we're talking about, for example, HPLC and release testing of drug products. The audit trails are very important. Again, when we're thinking about chemical analysis and release of drug products, we need to understand if methods have been changed, if sample weights have been altered, if drug products are being re-injected several times in order to get passing results. A lot of that information can be reviewed and evaluated in the audit trail of the system. Static versus dynamic records. A static record is just a fixed record, a printout, for example, a chromatogram, where the dynamic record would be actually going online into the chromatography system and being able to interact with the system itself, looking at changes, reprocessing, being able to expand the baseline of a sample in a chromatogram. Backup data sets. It's important for firms to be able to understand what they need to be backing up. It's not just the finished result, the end result. It's any data that's editable data, including the metadata, as well as system configuration settings. And then finally, system validation. So validating the system works as it is intended to work, as well as validating the backup and recovery systems. So I mentioned these things a few times before, and I wanted to include just a slide to summarize the differences. The current good manufacturing practices are mandated by the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Finished pharmaceuticals must meet CFR 210 and 211, whereas the APIs, they are regulated off of the Act itself, and we use the ICH Q7 as a guideline. If you're interested, I can provide links to you so that you can read either 211s or Q7 if you're interested in that information. So just to spend a couple minutes on the warning letters for data integrity, there's a couple of citations I showed you earlier that we will focus on when we're looking at data integrity issues. The first one I wanted to mention today was 211-194A. Your firm failed to ensure that lab records include complete data derived from all tests necessary to assure compliance with established specifications and standards. Here we're talking about finding during the inspection when in the laboratory they were performing trial injections. These injections would be performed before the reported release or final injections. This would be done in HPLC, GC, and UV injections that we've seen. Also instances where raw data, where the sample preparation information is not being maintained. So, for example, sample weights, the tapes are thrown away, or there's no information of the standards being prepared or the sample itself being prepared. Also, just generally discarded data found in the trash. So, example of a warning letter for that particular citation. During the inspection, management acknowledged employees in the QC labs conduct trial injections prior to the injections submitted as the reported test results. These trial injection data files were stored on separate drives from the reported test result data. In some cases, original data files were deleted. The results of these trial injections and other original data were not reported. So in this particular example, the investigator went into the laboratory and looked on the computer to find specific data that was used to support release of product. And when they looked in the files to find the electronic data files had been deleted. They also looked through audit trails, and they were able to find that there were several trial injections during the course of the sample testing. So another example would be 211-68B. Your firm failed to exercise appropriate controls over computer or related systems to assure that only authorized personnel institute changes in master production and control records. So here we're talking about just the general lack of basic lab controls. So audit trails were turned off. So when the audit trail is turned off, you really do not know what's going on with the testing. Typically, with the setup of an electronic system, there's one administrator, and that administrator will have privileges, have all privileges, and then other user roles will have privileges only to, for example, test samples or to approve samples as a peer reviewer or as a manager. In these particular instances, we found that all users in the laboratory had administrator privileges. The audit trails have been turned on and off throughout the processing over the years. That also allows analysts and managers, whoever's in the laboratory who has access to the system, to delete data. We found firms that were that had personnel that were running a test, getting a result that they may or may not have liked, and then running a second injection, naming it the same name, the same file name, which basically overwrites and deletes the initial original data. And then also sharing usernames and passwords. One of the things I mentioned earlier with Alcoa, with the general data integrity concepts, is that data needs to be attributable, and that's attributable to a single person. So when you share a username or password, it's not possible to know who is responsible for generating that data. So for an example warning letter, our investigators reviewing data from the HPLC for release testing, including assay and purity testing. Your quality control analysts use admin privileges to change the controls for time and date setting and manipulate file names to overwrite injections and delete HPLC data. Analysts also routinely turned HPLC audit trails on and off. Your response acknowledges these practices. So in this particular case, the analyst had the ability to change the clock that's in the lower right-hand corner of your computer. So they would analyze the sample, possibly get a result that was not what they were looking for whatever reason. And then at some point later on, they would go into the clock, the computer's internal clock, change the time and the date back to when the original samples were initially injected, and then re-inject samples again. We don't know at that point what was being injected. The sample preparation information wasn't available. And then what the firm would do after that would be they would rename the sample the same name as the sample that was originally run, which would, as I mentioned, overwrite and delete the original data. Another example, controls on the computerized chromatographic instrumentation were not adequate to prevent analysts from manipulating processing parameters in order to obtain passing results. So in this particular instance, analysts may have gone back in and changed integration parameters. They could change sample weights, anything that they could do in order to get a failing result to then pass. Again, here we see backdating of test data. But it's also important to mention before I move on from data integrity that it's not just in the laboratory. We also see it outside the laboratory and just general old school paper-based records. So backdating and fabricating of data. So companies we found rough notes that were an unbound or uncontrolled loose leaf paper. They were taking notes on that paper, documenting maybe information regarding the tablet press speeds or results from in-process tests, transcribing that information onto the batch record and then destroying the original record. Backdating of production records, so personnel maybe were not even on site to be able to perform the activity, and then they would backdate that information. And then destruction of original records and backdating revised replacement pages. So we found several instances where there were several trash cans and trash bags full of papers, and the investigators went in to look at that information and found torn pieces of batch records, torn training information, preventative maintenance records. All of this information had been documented on the firm's official forms per their procedures, but later had, for whatever reason, the firm had decided that they no longer wanted to keep this information, and it was found in these trash bins, either around the manufacturing areas or even outside of the firm in their dumpsters. So in summary, data integrity breaches really do undermine assurance of the pharmaceutical quality units. We don't, at that point, we really don't understand quality, the safety, the efficacy of the product that's out on the market. It's a breakdown of the basic trust. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we're not on site all the time. We can't review every single record. So we have to look at a subset of the records and the information that are generated at the site and really feel confident that that firms are doing the right thing when we're not there. But as it draws down to it, data integrity breaches really are a fundamental failure of the quality system itself. So prior to a new draft guidance that we recently issued, we issued just some general question and answers addressing data integrity. I think they were issued in August of 2014. Since we have issued a draft guidance, most of them have been removed, but there is this one specific question that's still on that particular website, which is listed here at the bottom. So how do the Part 11 regulations and predicate rule requirements apply to electronic records created by computerized lab systems and the associated printed chromatograms that are used in drug manufacturing and testing? So I have heard out on inspection that firms don't always maintain the electronic data, and they consider the printed paper copy to be the original. So this question and answer is really supposed to drive down to that. For HPLC and GC systems, or really any other computerized system that involves user inputs or outputs, audit trails or otherwise, the predicate rules require electronic data themselves to be maintained and maintained in accordance with the regulations. So the printed paper copy of the chromatogram is not considered to be a true copy of the entire electronic raw data used to create a chromatogram. So the printed chromatogram would also not be considered an exact and complete copy of the electronic data used to create the chromatogram, because it doesn't include, for example, the injection sequence or instrument method, the integration method, or the audit trail. All these things are used to create the chromatogram and are associated with its validity. So we do recognize that there are cases where it would be appropriate for the printed chromatogram to be used within labs for the review of test results. It might also be acceptable to provide the printed chromatogram during a regulatory inspection or for application review purposes. However, the electronic record must be maintained and readily available for review during the inspection or maybe by your QC or QA personnel on site. As I mentioned, we have issued a new draft guidance. It's called Data Integrity and Compliance with CGMP. It was issued almost a year ago in April 2016, and it's set up very similarly to how we had it set up before with the question and answers. There's 18 questions and answers within the document itself. While I'm on the guidance discussion, there are several other recent CGMP guidances that our office has issued. The requirements for CGMP requirements for combination products, contract manufacturing arrangements for drugs, quality agreements, and then circumstances that constitute delaying, denying, limiting, or refusing a drug inspection. There's links there to each of them if you have further interest in reviewing them. Our most recent guidance that's been finalized, the FDA guidance on quality agreements. It came out in November of 2016. So what is a quality agreement? It's a comprehensive written agreement that defines the responsibilities of the quality units of each party in contract manufacturing of drugs subject to current good manufacturing practices. We find that there's more and more contract manufacturing and larger supply chains. So it really is important for each member to understand what their responsibilities are within contract manufacturing, whether you're the owner or the contract manufacturer. It's important to understand what needs to be done, who has the authority and ultimate responsibility of the product. So just a couple references there for you. As I mentioned, all of our warning letters are posted online. You can either go through just to FDA.gov and cycle through to find the warning letters. Here's also a direct link. Some of our compliance information, and then if you have general information or questions, here is my office email for those general questions. And specific questions to me or the presentation, here's my information as well. So I wanted to leave a lot of time for questions and answers because I know with the Richmond chapter, I wasn't really sure what everybody's background was or where you really wanted me to focus the presentation on. So if you guys have questions, please feel free. It's kind of hard with the webinar. I've never done one of these before, so it's hard not being able to see your faces to see if there's questions or confusions on what I've been talking about.
No, no, you did very well for being your first webinar. Thank you very much, Brooke, for doing this for us today. If anybody does have questions for Brooke, please type them into the chat box. And as you're doing that, I'm going to remind everybody once again that our next webinar will be on Tuesday, March 7th. It will be Better Business Bureau Standards and Accreditation, and that talk will be given by Tom Gallagher, who is the president / CEO of the Central Virginia Better Business Bureau, who is headquartered in Richmond. So for that talk, please join us on Tuesday, March the 7th. And I'm looking in the chat box and seeing if there's any questions, and we don't see any at this point.
Yeah, I don't see any either. I'm surprised. No questions? Nothing? This is the fun part. Okay, well, if anybody has questions, maybe something that you don't want to share with everybody or whatever, please don't hesitate to reach out either by phone or email. I'm available and happy to answer any questions that I can.
Brooke, I think we might have a question here. T, you want to go ahead and ask it?
I was just surprised that a company can refuse an FDA auditor coming in. I thought if the FDA came, they kind of had to let them in.
Yeah, they can't. And that's what one of our newer guidance is. Let's see. Circumstances that constitute delaying, denying, limiting, or refusing a drug inspection. What we've seen, at least the information that I'm aware of, is that it happens more often outside of the U.S. On our international inspections, where the firm, I know a couple of friends who actually either gone to a site where they've told the investigator, you're done. We're done with this inspection. It's over. You can't look at anything else. I've also known of investigators that during the course of the inspection, they'll request to look at, at a certain building and that building, oh, well, we can't provide access to that building for you, or we can't provide those specific records. And what ends up happening is those particular firms go on import alert, and their products are not allowed into our country. It was, when this first came out, it was pretty groundbreaking for us to be able to do this. And so that's why we issued this particular guidance, so that firms would understand, you know, what does it mean delaying or denying or limiting. So it's actually really interesting guidance to read.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brooke. Looking at the chat box, there still aren't any questions in there, so I guess we're done for now. If anybody does have questions, Brooke did provide her contact information. She also told me that she was going to be providing me with a copy of her slides, and her contact information is in her slide on the last page. So if you do have questions you think of later, don't hesitate to reach out to Brooke. She should be able to answer them for you, or be able to find the answers to whatever your questions might be. With that all being said, thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you very much, Brooke. And I hope everybody has a good rest of the day.
Thanks so much, everyone.